Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am talking to Kathryn Burton-Gray. She has been, I always sort of weird when I'm talking to people who've been in the industry for a long time, right, Kathryn? Because I say, she's been in forever. And I'm always weird that people are going to say, well, what are you doing? Call me old, but you've been in the business for a long time. You've seen a lot of changes. I am really, really excited about having this conversation today. And we are going to get into it after this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So, Kathryn, before we get started, I just want to make a quick mention that Foresight TV is brought to you by KARE with the K. They are the anti-staffing agency. They basically help you as an operator fill those empty shifts because somebody's on vacation or you're just short-staffed at a cost that will not break the bank. They are easy to sign up with. They are easy to get going with. They are great people. Most importantly, they really love the senior living industry. They're passionate about this industry. They're deeply, deeply involved. They're committed to making it better for the people who live and work in senior living, which is what we are committed to. And so we just appreciate their support making Foresight TV possible. And so with that, Kathryn, let's talk about senior living. And I want to start by getting to know a little bit more about you.
Okay, sounds great.
So tell me about how long you've been in the business, what you do, and we'll go from there.
I have been in the industry for quite a while. I think we're both in that club. I started when I was 3. So I'm now 26. Yeah, well.
Yep.
I've done everything, actually. I started in banking, and I've been mostly on the capital side of the industry. And I remember I worked for a bank up in LA, and the choice was either doing entertainment or healthcare. And I thought I should do both. Let's see where, entertainment sounds like a lot of fun. Unfortunately, a lot of fun meant going to parties till 3 a.m. because you are financing the distribution rights of films and having to get up and be at work at 6:30. That didn't last long. So I ended up focusing on healthcare, and I have done everything in healthcare before I got into the seniors housing. So it was PPMs, if you remember that, physician practice management. Do you remember IPAs, capitation, financing, specialty pharma? So I literally had a broad experience in all of healthcare, which really lends itself to this particular industry because it touches on everything. So anyway, that's literally, so I started in banking. I worked for a company called Finova Capital. That's where I really got into seniors housing. And then I worked for a lot of other big institutions. I've ran national platforms from 3 institutions, and I have done everything from soup to nuts. I started in credit, and I think that really helps when you understand the discipline of the math behind making the decisions, because a lot of people in business development just get into business development because they're gregarious, they're interesting, they can establish rapport, but they take a package in and hand it to somebody. And so I needed to understand all that aspects of it. And so literally I graduated I triple majored, none of it was in math. And so I've taken all my math classes. And this is for anybody thinking about getting into the industry, because nobody wakes up and says, oh, I think I'm going to go into seniors housing. They either go into real estate or finance. And so we have to do a better job of getting actually more people into our industry, whether it's recruiting at colleges. Anyway, I'm digressing because you're asking about my journey, but I think that's an important point that I'm really trying to make, is because we need more diversity in our industry. And I was one of the very few women. I actually remember Dominic, I wonder if he's on this, Romero, saying that the first NIC were 3 women and it was KBG and a whole bunch of men. And I used to wear my little bows and my suit, I call it my suit, my uniform. And like I said, there were only 3 women, so everybody knew who we were.
So
But
I'm going to stop you here for just one second. It's really interesting that you say that. 3 or 4 years ago, Nick put out some diversity statistics about attendance at the NIC conference. And I was really, really surprised. The number of females was, I think, about 20%, maybe a little bit less. And just observationally, I would have thought it was more balanced than that. So I think we've got a long way to go still.
Well, and actually, that's a very valid point because there were 7 of us, were founders of what we call Senior Living Women's Initiative. And it's a nonprofit just for that exact reason, what you just articulated. How do we get more women who are not in the operations and caregivers, and that's all important and that's equally, but how do we get them more vested in our industry? And it's about right. It's 0.25% women. It's moving up, but it's not, it's maybe 26% now. And I keep asking that statistic to Nick is, how many more women are we getting into the industry and what can we do as a group to attract not only just women, but diversity.
I mean, it's one of the things that I've written about and talked about, and I know sometimes makes the industry uncomfortable, but frankly, even more so than male versus female, we've got a serious lack of diversity in the C-suite and the capital side from an ethnic standpoint, and it really needs some work. The one thing I do want to say, just in sort of to the audience, is that Kathryn's house is not really possessed by ghosts. There's actually a dog behind that smoky door that we keep seeing, just a little bit of wandering through the frame. So.
Well, it is haunted though, but that's another story.
Yeah, and I did get to meet the puppies before we went on air. So talk to me a little bit about what you're actually doing today, what you're focused on, what you're interested in.
Okay, well, let's start with all the fun stuff that I'm involved with. So I'm definitely on some nonprofit boards that definitely consume. Those are like full-time jobs, by the way. I'm on a hospital board for Providence Hospital System. I was on it 10 years ago, came back on. So I've been on now 13 years. I think that's a really, we talk about our industry evolving. I would say hospitals are trying to figure out what they're going to be when they grow up. They're going through their own self-discovery. What are they going to be in the future? And I've been lucky enough to go to Washington, D.C. and be on certain panels and certain boards that promotes those questions. And we've seen sort of the influx of different, I want to say, faith-based hospitals, because Providence is a Catholic-based hospital, and it merged with a Presbyterian hospital, and that didn't work. And it didn't work for various reasons, but nonetheless were things like, abortion is a big issue. So obviously the Catholic hospital systems prohibits that, where the Presbyterian allows it. Again, another heated issue, but anyway, I'm digressing. The point being is that hospitals are trying to figure out where they fit in this, and why that's important is it's important to us in our industry, is in particularly skilled nursing, because hospitals basically started out, our industry started out in the hospital sector, essentially, with nursing homes and board and care. And anyway, so we've seen a lot of like CMS and making sure that when they go into a hospital, they're not readmitted back to the skilled nurse, or when they're in a skilled nursing and they have to be readmitted back in the hospital, the skilled nursing gets dinged for that. And so there's been a lot of trying to figure out, is it high acuity? Is it preventative? And so I love being at the table in discussing really what is hospitals doing, because it does affect our industry. The other thing I'm involved in, I love art. I did go to the Art Center College of Design up in Pasadena. I thought I was going to go into advertising. I thought I was going to be a lot of other things. And you do that when you're young, but I kind of still have an interest in art. So I'm on an art college. I'm also on the museum in Laguna Beach, and that's whole other interesting, trying to keep the younger generation engaged and interested in art. I think there's a lot of dying. Opera is a dying breed. I think theater is dying. And how do we keep these forms of entertainment interesting to people? The other thing I'm on that I'm really excited about is I'm on ULI, the Senior Housing Council. Actually, I'm the chair now. I've been on for quite a while, and it's fun to, I love ULI. I can't say enough about ULI. And for people that don't know what that is, it's Urban Land Institute, and it's a special product council, and mine happens to be senior housing. And what's really fascinating, it has a developer, so it's about, if I look at our audience, I'd say a third development, a third other vendors, being attorneys, architects, insurance, and then you have capital and you have operators. So it's the combining all those, put those people in a room and discuss where are we going with development, because development, I can talk about that for hours. I think we need to really stop and think about what we're developing. Is it meeting the needs? The boomers are the next ones that are going to be really heavily using our industry. And what does that look like? And I think what also is interesting is the classes are changed. It's kind of like the barbell, I call it, where you have skilled nursing on one end and you have active adult on the other. And I'm seeing the active adult meshing with the independent living, and I call it active independent. I think I'm making that up. I don't know if it really exists. And then you have assisted living, and assisted living ended up becoming part of memory care in terms of specialized services to individuals with dementia. And, now we have standalone memory care, dementia. And then we have, again, high acuity, we have the skilled, and then we have hospitals. And we're trying to figure out, what is this going to look like in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now? So I love having those discussions and doing case studies where you have a developer in the room, you have an architect in the room, you have a general contractor in the room, you have capital, you have the debt provider, you have the equity, you have some of the limited partnerships, you have the operator, and to have the discussions of why they made different choices and who's driving those choices, it's invaluable. This has been really a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. The other thing is,
I want to talk for a minute. I want to sort of stop you there. I'd like to talk a little bit a minute about the sort of the product thing. So we've got in the industry, as you know, everybody's talking 10,000 new boomers every single day. The number is going to go up to like 20 or 30,000 a day, that are turning 65, that are just, and so there's this sort of almost this sense of relief of our occupancy problems are going to be solved by demographics, particularly as we see interest rates are being so high. So the development pipeline has not come quite to a standstill, but has really slowed down. So on one hand, that looks like really good news. And yet, this past week, Brookdale released their monthly occupancy numbers. And while they talked about year to year being up, if you actually dig into the fine print, you realize that their occupancy from last month and this month has actually dropped a bit. And so that sort of flies in the face of it. So I'm going to give that as one piece. And then the other piece I want to give you, and then I'm going to let you respond to this, is that I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a independent living community in a very competitive marketplace. It's his building and one other that's about 3 miles away. People kind of both look at both. And one of the things he was talking about is his competitor building has a whole bunch of amenities, dog washing, dog runs, some gymnastics and things that not gymnastics, but a fitness center and those kinds of things. And he was sort of bemoaning the fact that people often choose that building over his because of these amenities. But if you actually go over there, nobody ever uses them. And so how do we get this product thing right? Or maybe we just have to have that stuff, even though nobody uses them because it sells our building. So I'm going to shut up now and let you respond to all that.
Well, you kind of answered the question in some respects. Yes, occupancy is going down. The question that you're asking is why? Is it that we are not building for future generations? Is it an affordability issue that, we're the 1% that can afford these facilities? And if you really want to rock your world, for ULI, we went and toured the Sunrise building on 86th Street. Those rates are in the $20,000 to $30,000 a month mark. And there's a waiting list. So there's a demand for it. But, this is interesting. I knew you're a statistic guy and I'm a statistic girl. So I wanted to say currently there are 71.6 million in the US right now of seniors, of what they consider seniors. But the big question is, and if I look at the boomers, because I want to answer it, but I have to bifurcate this question.
You bet.
We're going to be the next, and I say we because I'm a boomer, sadly, or not sadly.
I don't know. I'm a boomer and I'm sort of happy about it.
I am too, but there's two segments and I'm pushing that. I've been saying that at ULI for a long time. There's the boomers that are from 1946. I have to look at my notes to remember this, to 1954. And those are 78 to 70 years old. They went to Woodstock. I was just a kid when all this happened. And I'm on that other end of the boomers, the 1955 to 1964. And those people are 60. Ooh, I'm giving out my age. I don't know if I like that. 60 to 69. Then you got the Gen X that are 1965 to 1980. And candidly, I see blurred lines between my boomer at the end of the boomer and my Gen X. And then you got the millennials and then it goes on, and I can't spout those statistics. But the point being is, what are the boomers going to want? And I say the boomers, the first generation of boomers, that 1946 to 1954. What are they going to want? They used to go to concerts. They're not used to waiting in line. I doubt you're going to see them at Coachella. There's a lot of things they like that I'm not saying we're thinking about. It almost seems like we're building the same thing over and over and over from when I first got into the industry and started financing. I financed actually some of the oldest assisted living. I remember, there wasn't that many players, and some of the big companies like Beverly, if you think about Beverly, think of all the people that came out of Beverly and started different, whether it was skilled or assisted living, all coming out of, and then you have the Pacific Northwest where these people came out of Regency with Walt Bowen, and they, you have the Fogs, and you have, Marquis, you have some of Prestige, and they're all Avamere, and they're all like some subset of all these things. What are we building? So the question is, why don't we're so insular as an industry. I think we need to go out of our industry. I think we need to look at companies like consumer companies to figure out, what does the consumer really want? And then think about building it. Things like they want open architecture. They want places to have cocktails. You come into a big lobby area, you can socialize, because socialization is so important. But going back to your question about occupancies, I'm seeing a lot of occupancy drops. In fact, at ULI, we had Nick do a presentation on really what's happening with occupancy. And it's really, I would say, super regional, but it's also the boots on the ground. You can't take a Brookdale and make a sweeping statement that their occupancy.
To me, the occupancy is a really interesting challenge. And Welcome Home puts out, they've got they certainly don't cover all the markets, but they also don't discriminate in sort of only the markets that Nick looks like. And their numbers would actually suggest that the numbers that Nick puts out for occupancy are a bit on the optimistic side. They're all self-reported, and I think the other part of this is that you already talked about is the affordability question, right? Nick came out a number of years ago with the early middle market study, and that from their perspective showed this huge demand for middle market. I actually read the study differently than that. My conclusion was that there were a lot of
I think
middle
you
market
froze,
people.
Steve.
What's that? Am I missing?
Yeah, there you go. You're back.
Okay, great. So that the middle market study actually showed there were an awful lot of middle markets, older people who were finding housing. And so I'm sort of more of a glass half full than a glass empty. But as I look at the market today, costs for senior living have gone way up. People's incomes have not. We're seeing decrease in people's generation. And so maybe we need a more basic product. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let me finish the thought on that the first two questions, because I think COVID has been a big factor in changing. And you say, well, why do you feel that way? I think one thing we learned is that you could work anywhere and you could be anywhere and you could make choices. And so a lot of people moved out of big cities like New York. There was an influx of moving out of New York down to Florida, to Phoenix, to even to California. And I've even seen it on sort of residential real estate. I live in Laguna Beach. It's a coastal community. It's a wealthy, affluent coastal community. People were coming down and paying cash. And I was thinking, well, they're coming from New York, which they did, but mostly like from San Francisco and other places, because they realized I want a quality of life. So I'm going back to what you're saying, but here's why I want to make this point, because we always thought you need to be near a big metropolitan city. You could put some in scattered suburban outliers, but COVID kind of threw all that out. And we've seen, obviously, you keep reading the news that there was an influx out of California into Texas, into Florida. That stopped, and it's coming back into California. But I still think that affordability is going to be a huge issue. And we're not even talking about that. The savings rates of boomers are negative 4%. And we're the wealthier generation. We're not even talking about the millennials. In fact, the millennials will not have the generational wealth that their parents had. So that's an issue. So I think what's happening is, well, I can talk about Laguna. Let me just talk about, because I used to be on the senior center. It was a small board. We decided affordability was a big issue, and Section 8 housing is not going to fly in Laguna Beach, but we tried to patch it with different solutions. And one was AUDs, the alternative living units, where you could build a small substructure next to your house, and you could rent it out to the elderly, to people that could rent, because rentals in our coastal communities are ridiculously high. That didn't work because people were expanding their homes and making their house bigger, and bringing in multi-generational. So what was happening is parents were moving into the small, and their kids were moving into the bigger portion of the house. Now, that's not a problem for the rest of the nation, but I think what it's doing, it's prolonging people from selling and moving out into these facilities, because everything, you have a generational to provide if it's needed. But I still think affordability should be and again, that's another subject we can talk hours and hours about, but that is definitely looming in the back, because what I just articulated. So if I'm telling you that boomers have a negative 4% savings rate, it tells me, where is most of their money trapped in? Their houses. Real estate mortgages are now hitting 7 and 8% residential. they're not going to sell a house with a 3% mortgage to move into, unless they're moving into a facility, unless it's needed. Otherwise, they're going to stay in their home longer. So this is causing all this bottleneck because the boomers are not selling. The inventory is really high. You would think that housing prices would start to fall. They're not falling. That's why I'm saying it here, folks. The Fed is not going to lower rates this year. I do not see it. I'm following all the investment banking, Goldman Sachs. They're starting to agree with me. I've been raising that flag saying, be smart with your money. Think about what you need. Think about your retirement. What's the next thing? But I think that has a lot to do with occupancies.
I agree with that. And I think part of the reason that houses are not selling is that people are looking at the values that were there 18 or 24 months ago before the interest rates down. And they're looking at that and saying, I'm not going to sell unless I get that. The problem is with the increase in interest rates, the cost of buying that house has gone up, from in terms of a monthly mortgage payment, maybe double, right? Or close to double. And so it's gotten really, really expensive. I'm very fortunate. I live in a neighborhood that is more luck than skill. I'm going to tell you, we bought the house that we live in 10 years ago. We are in a very, very desirable neighborhood. We actually have not seen values drop much. And I was talking to a neighbor the other day, and he said that we're a D&D neighborhood. I don't know whether you've heard that term before. The only time that houses become available in this neighborhood is when somebody dies and there's a divorce, right? So, and he's really, single family house on a half acre, they just don't do that anymore. But it's a big challenge because, I've got huge equity in my house. I could unlock it, sell it, but I'm just not, no motivation to do that. So I want to hit two. We don't have a lot of time left. I want to hit two things that I know you are really passionate about: women and senior living. I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about some of the things you're doing in that arena. Let me tell you, the other question I want to hit before we get done is, why should people come to work in senior living?
Okay, so let me talk
about. You can go in any order you'd like.
All right, let's talk about women in senior living. So, being a woman in banking, not even senior living or finance, I was a groundbreaker. I guess I was always a groundbreaker. One of my first jobs was pumping gas when women didn't do that. I did it because the cost, I could make more money doing that than I could at Montgomery Ward. There's a name that people haven't heard for a long time. It was a sales associate.
Jada, who's behind the scenes producing this, she's going, Montgomery Ward? Usually, we used to call it monkey wards, and that won't help you a bit, right? So
that's right. And that was growing up in Chicago. So, women, I know how hard it was for me. Like I said, I feel like I blazed a lot of trails in not only our industry, but just other industries in banking. When I was in banking, I became an underwriter. That was mostly men were in credit, not women. Yeah. So I went from that to recognizing that, and we had our own issues. I'm not even going to go through. I look at this generation and God bless them, their causes about, what we could talk about the entertainment industry, because that's pervasive, sort of sexualizing women in the industry. I know I can't even tell you some of the things I've gone through. They were absolutely ridiculous. But what I'm saying is, I think we've blazed that trail that the younger generation doesn't have to go. They don't tolerate that. But most importantly, I think if you're qualified, it doesn't matter what your skin is, what your sex is, what your ethnic background is. I think we should have opportunities given everything. And I'm going to touch on one touchy subject because I think it really helps me understand. But diversity, equity, inclusion is really, really important. And everybody understands what diversity is, and they understand inclusion, but they don't really think about equity. And I saw that growing up in Chicago, the fact that if I was a Black woman, African-American woman growing up, I wouldn't have the opportunities I have. I think equity is making sure that if I'm a person of color, that I get, it's a little bit harder for them to get the opportunities I had. And I am super sensitive about that, to the fact that I really take the time and things like, I think I talked to you about ULI, of making sure that our members are diverse, that we're seeing through a different lens. And I really pay attention to that, because I remember how hard it was being a woman, but actually it was easier for men to get promotions, even if they were men of color, than it was for women. Yeah. So that again resonates with me. And that's why I've been super, how can we do this? And we're different as women. We don't socialize the same way men do. And candidly, I think I was talking about, you can't, now we're at a point where, we used to have to tolerate dirty jokes and things like that, because otherwise you weren't cool and you'd be a problem. And now there's not that tolerate. We don't have to worry about that. But in doing some of that, I think men tippy-toe around how to deal with women in certain casual environments. But what I say to them, and I say this to women, and I want to just tell you a quick story, and I'll answer your other question. I remember being at a NIC, and I got in an elevator with a gentleman who is really well known. He's a personal friend of the industry, and it was after a dinner, and he was after his dinner. We both got in, the elevator closed. When I came down the next day, everyone thought that we were having an affair, because I was a woman who got in an elevator with him. For him, it was like, he loved it. He was like, oh, this is great. For me, it was really humbling and intimidating. And it was very frustrating, because that's the way they saw me. They didn't see me, the fact that I got a 1570 on my SAT, that I'm actually pretty smart, that they discounted anything that I have to do with my character, but more they wanted to play that I'm a woman and I'm trying to move up the ranks by that nonsense. Anyway, so I have all those ghosts of all the things that happened to me, and I want to make sure that I help women navigate, because there wasn't that opportunity to do that, and there is now. And so what we've done with it is we've gone to NIC, we've gone to ASHA, we've gone to Argentum, ULI as well. And we've gone to these organizations and said, you need to have a networking that's women only, so that we can all go into a room and be comfortable and ask questions like, how do you navigate, breastfeeding when you have to work? How do you navigate being a mother and leaving your children? How do you navigate? How do you do all of these things? And we have a resource to do that with these women. So hopefully I've answered that question.
Good. Terrific. And then sort of last question, just working in senior living. I guess really the question is, I mean, would you go to your kids and say they should work in senior living?
I would go to my kids and, well, my kids are both Green Berets. So,
okay, good.
They're trained killers for the U.S. I don't know if that's something they would work in, but to your point, how would you describe, that's what I think, that's a responsibility of all of us. How do we get more people interested in seniors living? I think that what we have to do is you have to find people that that they care about seniors, they care about individuals. I think you have to look at people, if they want to go into the capital side of it, how do you convince them to, work in banks, work in finance companies that have specialty. In fact, I tell bankers all the time, don't just be a generalist, figure out what you're going to do, and you'll always have what I call career security, not job security. I think job security is a thing of the past. Have career security, because this industry is very rewarding. We even talked about health. That is a big thing of mine. I pride myself on the fact that I'm so-and-so, and I live in I live in California, the land of vanity, and I haven't had a facelift yet. Yeah. I want to live longer, healthier, that's another huge passion of mine. But anyway, to your point, I think we have to talk about different aspects of our industry. What really drives the value in our industry as far as the real estate is the operations. It's an operating model. So even if you're interested in hospitality, if you're interested in healthcare, if you're interested in finance, we fold all of those disciplines into seniors housing. So that's how I think we need to kind of sell our industry. I think we need more visibility. It would be nice to have airtime on the merits. I mean, show independent living, show active adult. Don't keep showing the skilled nursing, because people don't want to see people in walkers. They want to have, I think the one thing we miss out about what this industry is about, it's socialization. And that is the one thing. You want to feel a place of belonging. You want to feel part of something. So, I can go on and on, but those are all the things I see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to sort of wrap up by saying, I think that as we look to the future, I think that creating communities where people can build relationships and friends is particularly important to us boomers. I'm right at the cusp between I'm just barely in the younger boomers rather than the older boomers. I'm right on that. So I looked at Woodstock, way too young to ever be there, but it looked really cool, right? But I think that the relationship thing is probably more important, will continue to be more important. So how do we create communities where people can create community inside the senior living structure, right? So I love this. Kathryn,
can I make one more
yes,
comment?
you can.
I'm also on Direct Supply. I want to give a shout out to them. They have a developer collective in June. Sign up for it. They're a great organization, and they're looking to improve our industry and get people involved in it. So
cool. Great. Thank you very much. This has been awesome. I wish we had more time. Hang on for just a minute. After we are done, we will be back next week with another great show.